Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 229, and this one will be a bit of a surprise since it's a What I'm Investing In special. And I actually didn't plan on doing this today. It was a bit of a spontaneous decision, but based on what I've prepared for you all in this Red Pill Podcast, and with the way this crypto market is looking right now, I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to recap my entire portfolio with you all here in part 12 of the What I'm Investing In series, which many of you were requesting. So here we are. And since I'll be reviewing 23 different altcoin charts and up to 30 charts overall, that of course means we have a lot to cover here in today's podcast. So let's not waste any time and jump straight into it. But as always, before we get started, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer, or any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered the project in at least 3 months. And if it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history here on TradingView, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those projects will be selected for next week's Red Pill. And since I did this spontaneous What I'm Investing In special, what we'll do for next week is we'll combine the 2 to 3 top votes for last week along with the top 2 to 3 votes for this week, and that's the 5 to 6 projects we'll cover in next week's Red Pill. It's a fair way to do it since I wasn't planning on doing this particular special today, but here we are. We're gonna move forward with it, and I hope you guys have been having an amazing week so far. Crazy swings in this market over the past week, the 33rd week of the year. Plenty of code we've discussed over the 2 update posts that I've sent out during the week, but here we are, and I actually want to get started with today's podcast with Bitcoin hitting an all-time high on the date of August 14th, which is connected to the upcoming total lunar eclipse date of September 7th, as you can see over here in the eclipse calendar. September 7th will be the next total lunar eclipse. It's a date we've been talking about a lot, but we want to talk about the connection between August 14th and specifically this date of September 7th because they are 25 days apart, and this 25 connection is significant because we're in the Gregorian year of 25. We're also in the Hebrew year of 5785, which becomes the number 25. And September 7th, the date that we're connecting this to, is the 250th day of the year. When you remove the 0 using the rules of numerology, that's your 25 code. And it's also a 25 standard date numerology. So this is very important because this is all tied together. And we're just looking at 2 dates. And probably one of the most important dates of the whole year, which is ahead of us on September 7th. We're also in the year of the snake. And the snake is the serpent, which gives you the 97 code, and this is hiding a number within it. It's esoteric because 97 is the 25th prime number, and we're here making all these 25 connections for you with the 2525 date numerology, 25 days apart. And look at the date of September 7th in the Gregorian system. It's 9-7, just like here. Serpent is 97, just like crypto gives you 97, again, the 25th prime number. And it's even 25 in the Chaldean cipher. And we're talking about Bitcoin's current all-time high, again, the main crypto and also the ticker symbol BTC is 25, all coded with this 25 number. And we've recently had the Bitcoin all-time high on this exact day. And coming back to this more esoteric connection of the 9-7 code, we also have how the market crashed into April 7th, which was the 97th day of the year. So this is very important, again, with that 25 code hidden within it. So we have the 97th day of this year. We have the 9-7 date coming up on September 7th. And when we connect this April 7th, the 97th day of the year, to this recent August 14th, the day Bitcoin hit this new all-time high, not including the end date, it's going to be 4 months and 7 days, because this is the 4-7 date. So this is very, very important. We have the 4-7 date. The entire market crashed into that day, including the crypto market. And then 4 months and 7 days after the 4th month and 7th day of this year, you have August 14th, as above, so below. So we have a market low date and we have a market peak date for Bitcoin. Pretty fascinating how this all works out, especially because this April 7th crash was triggered by Donald Trump's tariff war, and Donald Trump is the 47th president of the United States. So this temporary all-time high for Bitcoin, and I'm calling it temporary because I still think we have at least another move up for Bitcoin leading into the end of this month, perhaps even the first couple days of September, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But this temporary all-time high for Bitcoin on this exact date, followed by the flash correction that we had on the same exact date. When you look right here, this was a almost $5,000 correction for Bitcoin. Pretty big, about a 4% correction on the day. This was 100% a ritual by the code, and here's all your evidence. It's right in front of you. So what's even more interesting about all of this is that last year we had the same exact thing happen with regards to the price action of the crypto market on essentially these exact dates. And this has been the case since the recovery from this April crash right over here. And from this April crash specifically into the May full moon, this is what's been a mimic of what we had happen last year. Let me just quickly check in on the microphone and we are good. So we'll see that we had bullish energy on the May full moon. Right there, there's your May full moon of this year, and the market, or specifically this altcoin and many other altcoins. I want to focus on just an altcoin chart here because it's a little bit more extreme when it comes to the moves. But you can see that we were bullish up until this May full moon. And then we have last year in the month of May, we were bullish into the May full moon, which is right there. Then you can see we had a correction for pretty much all of June into around the 4th of July. So right here, we have the 4th of July, big red candle for Doge. It was about 11% down, clearly a flash correction. And then we have it pivot on July 5th. So we have May full moon, very bullish. It's kind of a micro top, correct into June, all the way till the first bit of July, pivot, and then push up. Here we are, we have the May full moon, we have a correction through June, and then we have right here around the 4th of July into 5th of July, a pivot, and then followed by a move up into the July 21st date. Well, let's look at July 21st last year. And look at what happened. We moved up perfectly into July 21st, followed by a correction and a much deeper correction into the first bit of August. Here we are, we have a move up into the exact date of July 21st, and then a correction into the first couple days of August, same as this year. And then we recovered again until August 13th. And that is exactly what happened last year as well. So you have this move up until August 13th. And then we have a short-term correction into August 15th, pivoting around August 16th. And that is exactly what just happened this year as well. Then what happens next is we actually bounce up into around August 23rd, which, as many of you are aware, that will be the upcoming new moon in August. It'll be next Saturday. This is a new moon that we've been talking about for a while here. So this means we're likely heading up next week into the August new moon around August 23rd, same as we did last year. And now I need you to pay attention, because considering what followed the August new moon last year, which was this crazy shakeout. By the way, the exoteric narrative they gave us back then was the Japanese yen carry trade. This is what they were spellcasting us with. So we have all of this energy happening around this exact new moon, but what we had following the 2023 August new moon was the same thing. And in 2022, oh yeah, and in 2020, as well as 2019, 2018, 2016, 2015, 2014, 2012, and even 2011. So I'm not buying this Japanese yen carry trade bullshit. It's a spell. It's just make-believe economic nonsense fairy dust. What matters is the astrology. Because it's happened for 11 times out of the last 14 years, specifically notable in the crypto market. So, what do all of those 11 years I just listed have in common? A flash correction around the August new moon. And considering the fact that we really only have chart history for Bitcoin going back to 2010, when it was trading at a fraction of a penny, and honestly, I wouldn't even count that specific year in this analysis. Well, that means 11 out of 14 iterations had a flash correction on the August new moon, which, by the way, are shifting around depending on the year. So there's sometimes where we have an August new moon at the very beginning of the month, sometimes at the end of the month, sometimes in the middle of the month. And we're still getting this phenomenon. It's very fascinating. Just like we had a full moon local top on May this year, and also we had that same effect in May last year, followed by a deeper correction overall. This is a pattern, and here we're discovering those patterns and doing our best to determine what's likely to come next based on these patterns that we've discovered. So when we have 11 out of 14 iterations are a flash correction on the August new moon, well, what about those other 3 exceptions? Those outliers? Well, I'll let you know those years. It was 2013, 2017, and 2021. And why it's so important to isolate those 3 iterations is because there's notable space in between then, and also this pattern has occurred almost 80% of the time. So why are these outliers that made up the other 20% so important? Well, maybe some of you have already connected the dots, because you realize that 2013, 2017, and 2021, what they have in common is that they're all 4 years apart. And here we are, and 4 years after 2021, say it with me, it's the year 2025, the year that we're in now. And by the way, the August new moon is next week. It's next Saturday, happening right before the next Red Pill podcast. So we're only about 13, 14 minutes in today's Red Pill, and I believe this is already a very powerful podcast. Now I want to break down each of those 3 iterations for you, including their phases. I'll kind of give you these 4 phases that'll occur, just so that it'll make it a little bit more easier to follow for you all and to be able to apply to the current market that we're in. So we're going over to the Bitcoin chart. The only thing we'll keep on here is the moon phases, because we want to focus on the August new moon going back to 2013. Then we'll check in with 2017 and then 2021 to wrap it all up. So here we are. Again, this is one of those outlier years, because here's the August new moon, which we did have a correction of about 6% or so 48 hours after the new moon, but we recovered and pushed even higher into around September 3rd, which then followed with a notable correction here and here. And it doesn't seem like much, but this is pretty deep. This was about an almost 19% correction overall. And what's fascinating about this is that we didn't recover and make a new high until October 13th, let's call it. So I want you to keep this in mind because there's a couple of stages here, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but we'll take it one by one. So we have the August new moon. Again, this is an outlier because when I zoom out, you could see barely anything happened after it. Whilst like in this example over here, let me try to find one that's really extreme. Here we have in 2016, look what happened after the August new moon. Absolute massacre. Or just last year, I think is the best example, where literally the lows of our year happened on the August new moon. That was the lowest Bitcoin went for the rest of the year. Even happened in this iteration here in 2023. So we made a double bottom. August new moon, really big correction. And it of course brought all the altcoins down with it. But let's get back to 2013. I don't want to spend too much time going through all the other iterations where we had this flash correction because I've already done that before. I've done this pretty much every year going back to the start of my channel. So I don't want to waste anyone's time with this. And this is something you could all look up on your own. What I want to focus on today is those 3 outliers so that we could have really dialed in information. And I believe what we're likely to have occur coming up next week is something more like what I'm about to show you here. So again, we have the August new moon. Where are we at? Sorry, 2013. So we have this August new moon, nothing really too dramatic going on here, but we do push up into the first couple of days of September, followed by about a 19% correction sideways, and then we officially continue up into price discovery after October 13th is when the pivot happens and the momentum push to the upside occurs. So consider October 13th as a key date. Then we have the 2017 August new moon. We're not going to spend too much more time breaking these steps down because you're going to understand what I mean after this next example. So we have this August new moon here, although you can see that the following trading day, Bitcoin did have a little bit of a flash to the downside. It was pretty much completely bought back up. And then you can see we closed the day 2.4% in the green. So we closed the day overall bullish. And this kind of flash is something that could happen in like a 3 hour, 2 hour, even a 1 hour interval, especially with Bitcoin back in 2017 when it was a much more volatile asset than what we're seeing today. So I don't really count this pretty much because it was short-lived. It was within the same day. We closed green on the day and then we pushed up higher. That's why I'm considering it one of the outliers, similar to the last example that I just showed you with 2013. And what you're going to see that these 2 iterations have in common is that we moved up higher into September 1st, into September 2nd. Isn't that interesting that it's almost identical to the last example? Then we have a notable correction, which is around 40%, I believe. This was pretty messed up. Yeah, it was about 40% correction, very dramatic. And then you'll see that we started to recover again with this candle right here on October 12th. How crazy is that? Literally almost the same exact date for continuation into price discovery after initially topping out on almost the same exact date as well. So we're comparing September 2nd to September 3rd and October 12th to October 13th. And these are 4 years apart, guys. Like what? Unbelievable. Note the deepest part of the correction in this particular iteration was in September. It would also be for the last iteration as well, but we had a bit of a double bottom in the first couple days of October. So you can't completely count that out. Okay, here we are in 2021, the August new moon. You can see no big flash crash, no correction deeper. We actually just kept moving up, hence why it's an outlier. And then we moved up into September 7th on the September new moon. Perhaps some of you who are like OG wolves around here remember this. Some of the wolves here from back when I started my channel, because this is something that I warned about before it occurred. I even talked about it on a interview that I did with Coach JV over at 3T Warrior Academy. Wow. blast from the past, but this was a date that I ended up selling all of my remaining XRP that I was planning on getting rid of for that cycle. And boy, was that smart, because on this day, that was the highest that XRP went for the rest of the cycle up until just like last November. So from 2021 September 7th all the way to like Trump won the election in November 2024, XRP did not make a new high. So that was a really, really smart decision back then. Again, some of you might have been around when that occurred. It was pretty wild times because a lot of people were giving me a lot of shit for this decision. I was public about it, but I knew that there was something to this particular date because it was the start of the Shemitah year. And that right there requires its own kind of, podcast. But for those of you that were with me back in 2021, 2022, even maybe 2023, you heard me talk a lot about the Shemitah year, the 7-year cycle, and the Jubilee year. And also, we'll definitely be talking about the Shemitah again when the next 7-year cycle rolls around in 2028. But for now, no need to talk about it. Just fascinating how we had a push higher past this August new moon, when in every other iteration we're pretty much correcting really hard here. But this was an outlier, just like it was in 2017, just like it was in 2013, all 4 years apart. And you can see we did the same thing in all of those outliers where we move up into early September, followed by a notable correction. This is big, guys, especially because September 7th, when this happened back in 2021, that will be the date of also a full moon for us this time around. And it will be a total lunar eclipse, as I was mentioning a little bit ago, 3 weeks from now. So one thing to mention about full moons is that we've been bullish into full moons lately. And also we had a total, or not a total lunar eclipse, but we had a eclipse right here, and you can see that Bitcoin pushed up bullish into that. This is why a big part of my analysis for pretty much the past year was that we will see us move up into the second total lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle, which will be the September 7th lunar eclipse. The first lunar eclipse, or the start of our lunar cycle, was March 13th. So we are doing exactly that. And that's why where we're at right now in this cycle and how close we're getting to September 7th, I thought it was super important for today's podcast for me to lay out exactly how I see this to go, how I anticipate this going moving forward. But I do want to mention that we've been pretty bullish around full moons this year. So it wouldn't shock me if we were to also move up exactly into the September 7th lunar eclipse and then correct immediately after it, similar to how we did back in 2021. And ultimately, the fact that we are likely to be bullish past the August new moon into early September, let's call it the first week of September, because that's the pattern. So in 2013, 2017, and 2021, we initially topped in the first week of September. In all 3 iterations. We'll call that phase 1. That's what we're doing now, what we're moving into now. Then we had a notable correction in the month of September. We'll call that phase 2. So just so you're aware, in 2021, Bitcoin experienced a 25% correction here. It's pretty dramatic. In 2017, it was around a 40% correction. And in 2013, it was about an 18 to 26% correction, depending on if you count the liquidation ritual that happened on October 2nd, 2013. Talked about it a little bit ago. That only took a couple hours to complete. So it was really much just a big washout liquidation event. But of course, it still counts. So we'll say it was around a 20 to 25% correction as well. So in all 3 iterations, pretty nasty correction in the month of September. And also when we look at seasonality for Bitcoin, that's the only month we're pretty much in the red. August is known to be sideways, but funny enough, August can also be a month where we peak, where we have highs, and then it's by the monthly close, we give up all the gains. So keep that in mind. I don't really think that's how it's going to go this year, because Bitcoin has a tendency in post-halving years to have a pretty bullish August, and that's so far the case here in 2025. So it's also following the pattern regarding seasonality. And then we also have here seasonality proving to us that September is known to be a red month. And that's also the case for the traditional markets as well, where you'll see that unless it's a presidential election year, this is the deepest correction month that we have in the Dow Jones. So would it be weird to anticipate a correction in September? Absolutely not. Even if there's some rate cut shit that happens that they want to like pass around as a narrative that'll make us buy back everything by the monthly close, like the end of September moving into October, sure. But overall, it's known to be a red month. So you can see here that until September 30th, we then pivoted. And it made it so October looked like a really, really bullish month. And for Bitcoin, that's common. October, November are pretty much our best months besides April. So we have all three examples. We topped in early September, correction in the month of September. Then we had a time frame between October 6th through October 13th is when we were recovering from that notable correction. And then that time frame would be around the October full moon for us here in 2025. So keep that in mind. I'm giving you the timing here, guys, so please pay attention. Take notes. I'm giving you the timing. I'm saying that we are likely to move up through the August new moon, maybe around the August new moon, 24, 48 hours. We have a little bit of turbulence, but then ultimately we go higher into around the first week of September, correction after that, and then we have a buyback where we should be recovered by the second week of October. We'll call it around the October full moon. And that recovery phase we'll call phase 3. And then lastly, we have phase 4, which would be a all-time high cycle peak. So keep that in mind. And in 2013, this is where it gets really interesting, because in 2013, the all-time high cycle peak was the December new moon. Let me just show you so you can't so you can see for yourself. So we have the December new moon cycle peak. Then we have in 2017, December new moon is your cycle peak. And then in 2021, around the November new moon, it was about 3 days or so later, we had our cycle peak. So this gives us an exact range of time to anticipate this final run up for Bitcoin before the end of 2025. And that would be from around November 20th until December 20th, leading up to Christmas, where phase 4 is likely to be concluded. Also, remember, I've drawn this out for you guys several times. It looked something like this. I could try to find you a chart. Maybe I can't find it today in this podcast so quickly, but it's something I've drawn for you many times. Here's one example where we have Bitcoin getting up into like this 130-ish K territory, not higher than 150 just yet, and then a correction in the month of September, followed by a higher move up into Q4. So this idea is something that I've been putting out there now for about 3 to 4 months now. I've started to entertain it more since especially we've had that larger correction with the narrative tied to it in the month of April with Trump's Liberation Day, and how the whole market crashed at the same exact time, and how we had that V-shaped recovery all at the same time, and now new all-time highs for not only Bitcoin, but also the indices, the stock market, and also gold. And what gold is doing right now is part of that conversation. So if you didn't watch last week's Red Pill, please check it out, because I covered how gold is likely to top very soon, likely no later than the first week of September, which aligns with what I've just told you for Bitcoin. And the pattern shows that if gold tops in September, it will likely correct all the way till December. And that is when Bitcoin will move up. So gold correcting September through December is when Bitcoin pushes even higher, and when we have an alt season in all 3 past cycles. So it's perfect alignment with everything I shared last week, coupled with what we're talking about here this week. Also, given the fact that we've yet to have Ethereum and the overall altcoin market experience what we've seen in all of those 3 years that we just reviewed. And that's, of course, what we're preparing for here, and that's the alt season. And now, based on where we're at in these charts and the fact that we're getting closer and closer to the upcoming total lunar eclipse on September 7th, and we've yet to see the entire altcoin market hit new all-time highs across the board, this of course means it's more likely to see this move when we typically see it, which is Q4, latest leading into Q1 the following year. It's something that we've talked about a lot here, so please just remember in the overall conversation, we need to take everything one step at a time, and ultimately this is a new cycle because we have institutions involved. And these institutions are going to take over. They've already started for the most part because they have Bitcoin now, and Bitcoin makes up a majority of the market cap of this entire asset class. And you can see for yourself, it's surpassed silver, and pretty much in a single week can surpass Google. And I believe there will probably be a time during this cycle where it even surpasses Apple. That would not be weird, especially if gold gives up that 2 trillion, which I've talked about before. So gold giving up about 2 trillion or so, and then Bitcoin dominance dropping to around the 45% territory, still, you will see a major move up for Bitcoin in the midst of everything that will happen then. So, but even with all of that being said, we are seeing several confirmations that alt season is still in the cards for this cycle, whether it's gonna start to become noticeable in October or November or December, or maybe even a true peak in January at the very start of the year, which is what we saw back in 2018. Again, this cycle is very reminiscent of 2018. We also saw this technically in 2014, where Bitcoin topped right there at the end of 2013. Alts, the few that existed, were up at the start of 2014, right after the new year. Same thing happened in 2018 as well. So this can just all be a big cyclical repeat. And in the midst of all of it, it's been mostly the Bitcoin show. We're back in 2020 into 2021. There was a lot of new things that were coming into the conversation of crypto, like a lot of DeFi stuff, NFTs. I mean, even a lot of meme coins were being introduced, not just Doge, you know? So this is definitely a different story. And I entertain everyone's theories, but so far, sticking to this lunar cycle and solar cycle theory and thesis, it's working pretty well because we are looking at Bitcoin trading at 118K today. So it's not like it hasn't worked out thus far. And also with Ethereum pretty much pushing up towards all-time highs, XRP holding above $3. When I created all of those charts with the solar and lunar cycles and shared it back in the day, I don't even remember where ETH or XRP was, but I can guarantee you it was much lower. It's at least gone up 500% for XRP since. And maybe Bitcoin was around like 70K tops when I released that information. So we've come a long way since I've shared all of this. And now we're reaching this critical point now where we're about to cross over the upcoming eclipse. It'll be really exciting to see how this all goes. But I think everything that I've shared with you here in today's podcast is the most likely outcome, which is a very positive outcome with all things being said. So just keep that in mind, that we've yet to see every other altcoin do what Ethereum has just done, and that's catching up to Bitcoin. So I believe that one of the key things we're about to see is that in this transition between September, October, we're going to start to see a lot of alts do what Ethereum just did, where it's catching back up. And one of the things that I've been looking at more closely lately, and I'm about to share with you, is what Ethereum did back in 2020 into 2021. So let me quickly show you that. So we have Ethereum has just now caught up to the 2021 top. And we're also seeing Bitcoin dominance below 60%. That is very good. It's about 59% as I film today's podcast. So this is exactly what we want. I know it's not showing up in all the altcoins just yet. It could be discouraging for some altcoin investors, but anybody that's been around the last cycle or the cycle before that, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So please Be patient right now. This is the worst time to get in your emotions and to get impatient, because I saw a lot of people fall for this in the last cycle, and it was the worst time to allow those emotions to take control of you. So just clear your head, stay neutral, and for everything else that we're about to go through in today's podcast, just take it for what it is and be neutral as possible with it. Try to not get too distracted by the shiny objects and all the narratives and the stuff that you're going to see on mainstream media as we move forward, because I guarantee you they're going to bombard us with so many more similar things to what just happened last week, where there's PPI comes out and Besant says something negative, and then they blame all of what's happening in the crypto market on that stuff. And it's all just bullshit. So please be cautious right now, guys, because what just happened is going to keep happening quite a bit. And it's going to be like a 48-hour flash correction, and then we're going to go way higher in like 6 days later. It's going to rinse, repeat. We're just going to keep going higher and higher and higher. And it's the same thing that happened in 2021. Anyone was here in the last cycle, you remember it. They tried everything under the sun to FUD retail investors out as the market just pushed higher and higher week after week. And I feel like we're right back there. And what we're seeing right now in the Ethereum chart proves it. So the last time we saw this setup in the ETH chart was with Bitcoin trading into price discovery while Ethereum was catching up to its prior cycle highs back in December 2020 into January 2021. So it was right here. Let me turn off the moons. Let me go to like the 3-day chart so we could have both charts side by side. And you're going to see, actually better if I pull it like that, full fib pull, copying the fib pull that we had back in this cycle. And right here, once we see Ethereum clear this 888 fib, which we just did recently, it shoots straight up to retest the prior cycle top, just like we did here last week. And then we experienced some turbulence, and I know you can't see it, but it's what occurred, because as we were pushing up, we have right there, that's an 18% 3-day candle. When we hit the top, we had another 26, 27% correction. It doesn't look like it happened, but it happened, okay? Here you have, in the midst of all of this, a 18% 3-day candle, and then a 12% 3-day candle to the downside, and then another 11% red 3-day candle. Guys, those are 3-day candles. That was a lot to bear through over the course of 3 weeks or so. But look at the trend. It was moving up. And all throughout this, it was very confusing for retail investors to navigate. For people who know how to read the charts and have some emotional control and understand the big picture, this is just kind of what markets need to do on their journey towards price discovery. Bitcoin just did the same thing recently, okay? So this is all to just calm everyone down and show you the facts as everything unfolds and what we're about to effectively move into. So also, even after transitioning into price discovery, you see that back test right there? That is perfect. It was a clear back test of the prior highs for the Ethereum chart, which is a technical and a welcomed move for sophisticated traders. And to me, based on everything I'm seeing right now, I can anticipate us repeating a similar move here, where Bitcoin pushes up into the upcoming lunar eclipse in the first week of September. Maybe we only go to like 127K Bitcoin or 129. Who cares? It really doesn't matter at this point, because most of you don't even concern yourselves with Bitcoin's movement. It's more about what does it do to the altcoins. So I'm assuming Bitcoin will be pushing up into maybe September 1st, September 2nd, as late as September 6th into the actual eclipse date. I don't imagine it going up higher past that. Like, it would be weird to see Bitcoin go to September 11th, for example, and then have a major correction. I'm kind of just anticipating a repeat of what happened back in 2013, 2017, and 2021. So of course, if we were to move up into September 2nd, and then we had a quick correction, then we could, of course, rebound and push higher into September 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, etc. But I would not anticipate us just continuing to push past this lunar eclipse without a correction first. It's just kind of the way Bitcoin likes to trade with this pattern that we've identified. So, and then we would have a notable correction into the month of September that causes something similar to how things went in 2021 in January. So I actually want to take some time to show you what I mean by that. It's probably best if I was to do it with a dual screen chart. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up for everybody. I'm going to hide everything here on the right screen, pull up ETH. I'm going to go back to 2021, focus on this January timeframe. On the daily chart. I think this is really key to focus on because it's kind of what I see happening for the next couple months ahead. So we'll see from here, January 8th through January 27th, we had a 30% correction for Bitcoin. But look at the right side of the screen as I move my cursor. You're going to see that while Bitcoin was down 30% during this correction, Ethereum was effectively sideways and it was actually pushing up. The trend was up as it was sort of grinding to the upside. And even though it was, of course, experiencing a lot of turbulence in the midst of this grind to the upside, you can see that by February 2nd, right here, ETH was pushing higher, while on the other hand, Bitcoin was just recovering from this 30% correction that it just experienced. So what happened during this time fundamentally was a shift from the Bitcoin show to the altcoin show during this moment. But keep in mind that right here, Bitcoin was breaking into price discovery. We've been having Bitcoin break into price discovery now for a while, for a pretty long time now, but we've yet to see it dramatically push into the altcoins. And typically the way it works is we want to see Ethereum also break out into all-time highs, and then it becomes all eyes on alts, right? So that to me is what we're about to push into in the months of September through the rest of this year effectively. And the next correction that we'll have in September, although it will look like this for Bitcoin, I don't think it will look like this for all the altcoins. I think it will look more like this for the altcoins, where it's just a grind to the upside with lots of turbulence every other day or so, but not as bad as it was, let's just say on April 7th, where everything crashed much, much lower. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to have more of a rotation out of Bitcoin into the other alts. So I want to speed through this a bit, but I hope you understand what I'm comparing to here. So if we were to look at December 2020 through February 2021, right around here, and you were to do a side-by-side with Bitcoin and the altcoin market, you'll have a better visual representation of what I'm anticipating from now until October 2025, to be a little bit more specific, with next month, September, being this pivotal month in this whole cycle, since that's when it would make sense to see the rest of the altcoin market catch up, just like we saw with Ethereum, mostly focused on that mid-October timeframe. So since we've just set the tone for what's likely ahead over the coming weeks and months for this crypto market, let's now jump into these charts. Since we have a lot of them to cover, as mentioned in the intro, today's podcast will now be going over 23 different altcoin charts. And before we dive into those, let's first just quickly recap the upcoming weekly close and traditional analysis for Bitcoin, as well as a check-in on Bitcoin dominance and the total crypto market cap charts, so that we can have a thorough overview of all things crypto before we move on to Ethereum, XRP, and the rest of my portfolio in today's What I'm Investing In special. So we're going to get out of this dual screen. We're going to go back into the Bitcoin chart and put on the weekly. And where are we at? Similar story to what we had back on July 14th, funny enough, happening in the same week, just a month later. Bi-weekly chart though will be closing later today, and this bi-weekly chart from me trumps the weekly, and that will be a higher high potentially if we can hold this, let's call it 118K level. I would like to see Bitcoin close this upcoming daily at 118K, hold this level. It's a big ask in my opinion because we have the CME sitting at around 117,000, so there will be a bit of a CME gap, and what we just had happen in this week's mid-week correction was a fill of the CME gap. Bitcoin's just been loving creating these gaps every damn week. At this point, it's like just something we should all anticipate at this point, where we have a very bullish Sunday, create an upside, a gap to the downside, and then we maybe push up a little bit higher Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we come and fill it into the weekly close. It's just been the way it's been going. So here we are. Same story, but I do like this bi-weekly pushing up at about 3.5% green candle after we had a little bit of a stall out in the later July timeframe. We're looking pretty good here in August so far. This candle isn't so bad, but we're getting a clear resistance at 119K. Very funny too, my YouTube channel is getting a little bit of resistance at 119K. I've had 119K followers on YouTube now for like 2 months. I don't understand what's going on. It's super funny too that it's been the same for Bitcoin. Whatever. Jokes aside, of course 120 is a very important level, and we've yet to hit that 125, which for me feels like a sort of psychological, but not nearly as psychological as something as like 150K. So there's a lot of room between where we're currently getting stalled out at this 123 to 124 and something like 150K Bitcoin. A lot of room between there. And that's why, because we're cutting it a little closer to this total lunar eclipse, I'm not anticipating 150K Bitcoin until we get through eclipse season. So likely in the month of November, from the November new moon on November 20th through to the December new moon around December 19th, December 20th, that's where I would anticipate at least 150K Bitcoin before the end of the year. And the technical target of like 170 to 180 would make a lot of sense. Again, based on how past cycles have gone, fib pulls, etc. Now, looking at the daily chart, we are holding this 117K level support like a champion, because you can see all of this trading volume back here, holding it very nicely since we've broken out into this range. We had about 3 weeks over here, and then an additional, let's just call it another week. So yeah, this has been quite a bit of time, a full month for Bitcoin closing above 117, almost 118K. It's looking pretty good. I like to see this, and I just consider this all a ritual for Bitcoin to hit an exact high at an exact time based on the decode at in the beginning of today's red pill. In my opinion, that's just how it goes. This has happened so many times that it's not even shocking to me anymore that they manipulate the price into particular days for their own enjoyment. And of course, there's the ability to liquidate a lot of retail, because here it swiped through a lot of it liquidated a lot of people on the upside and the downside pretty much within a 24-hour period. So this kind of stuff is like a controlled demolition, and guess who's doing it to you? It's the exchanges themselves. I don't want to waste much time on that, but you guys should know these truths by now. Never trust the exchanges. So here I'm turning off the drawings, and I just want to look where daily's starting to look a little tight. So I am assuming that I guess the Bollinger Bands got pretty tight. Yeah, so the Bollinger Band squeezed pretty tight around here, and then we just had this kind of recoil effect of a too quick drop followed by a too quick recovery, and now we're back in the middle around that 20 SMA, which is very typical actually when we start to see a squeeze. It's something like here, like we see this bounce from top band to bottom band, and then again to bottom band after another extension to the upside, and then we just equilibrate before pushing up and having a true price discovery moment. Momentum still to the upside though. So until that changes, nothing to get worried about. The one thing I would say though is from a structural perspective, it was nice to see that we had all this resistance over here on December 17th, followed by the inauguration resistance. And then when we got above it, we did back test a lot of this liquidity, and we've pushed higher now and have even back tested this May 22nd high, so the May full moon high, and then have bounced to a higher high on a daily close. These are all good signs that Bitcoin is not done yet. Like, it still has room to go to the upside. So that's of course great to see. Now let's quickly check in with Bitcoin dominance, because I did bring up that I wanted to check that out, and we're going lower right now as we speak. So we're about to make a new low. We have. This is great. So we've now seen Bitcoin dominance make yet another new low, and I believe it's going to start heading towards the 618. And the sooner it does that, probably the better for the overall alt market, although a lot of this is going to flood into ETH, Binance Token, Solana, the top players, not as much into the stuff that's like 50 to 100 or 150 plus market cap by rank. But what I like to see is the fact that we broke below this parallel channel, got rejected off of it, and have made a lower move. And if you look back at us having the deepest correction since the current one, this lasted about 10 to 14 days, let's call it 2 weeks. And the one we're experiencing right now has been going on for over 7 weeks, pushing on 2 months. So we're comparing 2 weeks to 2 months. This is the vibe that we want. Okay. So this has been the longest kind of corrective sequence that we've seen in Bitcoin dominance. To me, this feels like it's coming to an end, which is what we want to hear. So for people that are getting mad about like no high for alts in August and maybe not in September, and you're worried and this, that, and the third, like, guys, you really need to understand that this is the only time in history that you can even be petty like that, okay? Back 20, 30 years ago, that was an impossibility. It did not exist to be able to put so little money into something that grows so much so quickly, and then to have the audacity to get upset about 1 or 2 or 3 month intervals is wild. So it's not to point fingers or to blame or to say anyone's acting a particular way, but it's just to reset the like Karen energy, okay? Because this is not the time to be acting that way. Whether you support what I'm doing or you think that I've been wrong about things, or it doesn't matter. To me, it's really irrelevant, because to me, I'm just looking at this for what it is. We're doing the best we can. And you could be wrong, I guess, but then also still be making a lot of money. So what side of this do you want to be on, And this frustration or just people getting upset right now because it's not happening when you want it to, that's a really dangerous energy to have. That's like the antithesis of a wealth-oriented energy. So I hope me saying that like actually helps people. It doesn't feel like I'm throwing, daggers at anybody in particular. It's for us to come back to a state of grace and to just be like, wow, in this opportunity that I have right now, I can make an insane amount of abundance compared to any time in history where it was nearly impossible. And there's a predictability to it also, where it's been happening every 4 years at least. And we're about to roll up on potentially the third full cycle in a row where it's happened exactly 4 years apart from the last. It's pretty amazing to have this awareness, while retail investors will wait and wait and wait and wait until we've already hit the top. So be very lucky that you're not one of them, and also the fact that you're here in a community of conscious, like-minded individuals that are trying to do something about their financial situation and not just sit around and waste their time. So anyways, getting back to this, Bitcoin dominance is doing something that looks very good right now. Unlike this, where we had a recovery, here we had a false move, false recovery, followed by a break below the channel. And we've been spending quite a bit of time below this channel and could potentially be closing a weekly today down yet again 2% on Bitcoin dominance. So the total correction thus far from where we've locally topped at the end of June till today is an over 10% move for Bitcoin dominance. This move over here was also about an 11% move. So we haven't done as much of a percent, but now you can see that this would be pretty much 1 week off from where do we go next. Because if we were to have another red week below this parallel channel, I think that's it. I think it will continue to slide more and more and more. And what I told you about the transition between December 2020 and January 2021 for Ethereum and Bitcoin, That's what this will all kind of look like. It's very positive news. I don't want to spend too much time on the total charts because, again, I have a lot of other charts to cover, but here you can see that we'd be closing in price discovery on this weekly. So as long as we could hold this level of around almost 4 trillion, it would look very good. Obviously, a weekly close above 4 trillion would look even better. This is really good to see if we could potentially close where we are right now on total 2. So this would be excluding Bitcoin. One second. And the reason I say that is because our high goes back to the week of December 2nd, where you can see we would actually be slightly higher than that level, and we would just be continuing our uptrend from the recovery from the bear market. Then, of course, we do want to see a concrete close above 1.71 trillion, but that's right around the corner. That could probably happen next week. Although, remember, the way that it could go, and I've talked about this with the Ethereum analysis, is that we could have something like this, where there's a backtest. And that could be happening while Bitcoin is doing something like this. Well, Bitcoin's having a much more, steeper, weirder correction, a much more scarier, because it's rotating into the alts. The alt correction will happen like the way it did in January into February 2021, or January 2021 to be more specific. Total 3, looking fine, pretty much pushing up against the macro highs. So we're right on track here, and others also. I don't love to pattern trade, and I wouldn't pattern trade this, but I do feel that others will always be lagging until Ethereum goes into price discovery. So it's not even worth really going too deep into that right now. I could follow up on that during a weekly update. Now let's look over at Ethereum, which has had a remarkable recovery. We are now seeing ETH at the highest weekly close we've had since back at the top of 2021. We've cleared the May top last week, and this week looks like it's the same story. So we had last week a 21.5% weekly candle, and today now we're looking at an almost 7%, 8%. Really nice to see, especially with this bear trap that occurred. This is kind of the setup that you want before a major upside move, similar to the C19 crash. And this backup phase right here being this move right here, we talked all about this. And then this recovery that we had is what we're getting right now. This turbulence, though, could be kicking in the month of September. And the fact that that's right around the corner, just consider that. So you see this red candle here, it shows 1%. But if you were to pull from the weekly high before that down to the bottom of that tail, it was a 30% correction. Okay? That's the type of shit that we could have happen in the next coming weeks. Okay, so there could be a little bit of chop as we break out into price discovery, but I've already explained that all to you earlier in this podcast. Now we're looking at XRP. Unfortunately, that's the same exact story for XRP, but the good thing is when we're looking at weekly structure, we've just had a bit of resistance going back on December 2nd at around 292. We have $3 on the nose, and then here at about 295. And since we've broke out higher, we've actually back tested those levels. We've retested them on this tail here, on this weekly close here, and then have bounced. And that's a very important technical structure that we're seeing, because we had a lot of sideways over 200 days closing all above $2, which is really important because back in the last cycle, we barely had any days closing above those levels. It was a blow off top. And now here we are. We've been just back testing all of the prior resistance week after week after week. This is actually a better outcome. I would much rather ETH take its time, XRP take its time than this straight line breakout stuff. Although, again, we all want higher prices. I get it. I do too. I'm a big XRP holder. It's my biggest investment that I have. And I do anticipate it going up to 14, 15, maybe even as high as 24, 25, depending on how things go in this alt season. But again, as an XRP investor, one of the most annoying parts about being an XRP investor is the fact that it just does these straight line breakouts and then it comes right back down. We don't want that anymore. So what would be ideal here in this situation is to have a much more structurally sound breakout. something where we perhaps go to $7, $8, have a little bit of a correction down to 5, and then have another impulse up to around 13, 14, 15, another correction down, and take our time in the midst of all of it, instead of there just being like 3 straight weeks where we go up straight to $20, right? Now, of course, we will have a exit strategy in place when that all comes to fruition. So no matter how it occurs, whether it's more of this like thunderbolt style breakout, or if it's the straight line breakout like we're used to seeing with XRP, we'll have our limit orders set. It's all good in the hood. Doesn't matter how it happens. It's just, it's going to feel a lot less horrible when the bear market comes, if we were to have a little bit of structure built at some of these levels. Because I can guarantee you, if we straight shot to 20, we will come back to maybe $1 in the future, because there's nothing below us. That's the nature of this asset, okay? And that's the nature of charts. People might think that sounds crazy, but you got to remember, like, it's typical for altcoins to lose 90 to 95% of its value in a bear market, especially with the upcoming bear market in 2026. Everything is very overvalued right now. And I get it. The XRP community has like a lot of believers that we're going to go to $100 a coin and we're only going to keep going up and up and up. And I'm sorry, I just don't believe that. I think we will come down with everything. We will pump with everything. It's how it's always been. I don't think that's going to change until I'm proven wrong. I will not be entertaining anything else besides my investment thesis. And if you have a different investment thesis than that's great. That's important. You are your own investor who earns your money for you and your family. Please do what is best for you and your people. I'm just here like the cup of coffee in the morning. I'm helping you wake up, but nothing more. So I will be sharing some more updates on XRP, but we will need more to talk about whilst we're trading sideways, which we have been now going on the past month. There's really nothing else to say. But of course, as a big XRP holder, I will be sharing a lot of information as we see the next move in the altcoin market. Now we're moving over to XLM. I have recently covered XLM and a couple other projects in Red Pills going back just a couple weeks ago, so we won't spend too much time on those, but just for the sake of it to discuss, we have XLM looking very nice right now, as it's had a pretty notable correction of about 30%. It's typical for altcoins, and a bit of a recovery, and I like to see this. We haven't yet broken above 47 cents, and that's about the level that I would like to see XLM get back above. So a daily close, or better yet, a weekly close back above 47 cents. And I think we will make our next impulse up very quickly to about 60 cents. Okay. So that'll be like, let's just call it the prior all-time highs. And based on the timing of things right now, I am not sold on that occurring before the September eclipse. So what I'm thinking is we're having something like this go down right now. Let me go to the 3-day. This like exact kind of structure, in my opinion, is what we're seeing right now. So we have a straight line breakout, a quick top, and then we have a notable correction. Let me see how many days this was, because that would be interesting. 120 days. So here we're about 129 days for the deepest part of the correction, measuring from the top to the bottom. We're like right there. And it could be a little bit extended, but that's kind of what I think we're in at this current time. So here it was about a 50% correction. Recently, it was about a 30%, as I just showed you. And the next impulse up will probably be more violent. But remember, this is how the last cycle went for XLM, where it was like pump, dump, pump, dump, pump, dump over and over again, having these 40% corrections along the way. Pretty arduous, pretty obnoxious to have to deal with, but that's what altcoins do. So you can see on the way up, it had 1, 2, 3, 4, pretty much 4 full 40% corrections before it gassed out on the upside. Could our recovery structure look a little bit about that? Look a little similar to that? Probably. It's in the cards for sure. So just consider that once we break above 70 cents to 80 cents, then it could be price discovery and we could go straight to $1. So I would anticipate by November into December, especially with everything we've talked about today, we should be getting that $1 XLM by then. And then, of course, deeper targets. 2 to 3 are absolutely in the cards. I will be going into like the selling versions of what I'm investing in, like this series. I will have ones for taking profits once we are actually seeing true price discovery for a majority of the altcoins. So keep that in mind. These, what I'm investing in specials, will kind of transition into the exit strategy podcasts, or just taking profit podcasts. I'm not sure what we'll call them, but we will have dedicated ones to talking about these prices on the projects that I hold. Don't worry. But for now, I do think XLM was in a good position when I was sharing my thoughts before we had the recent move up, because I was saying that I do see XLM has a lot more ROI than XRP, and that ended up being the case. I forgot what YouTube video that was I put out. It was probably like a couple months ago. And then we had this major impulse from here in July up to, yeah, it was pretty much this whole move right here. 100% pretty rapidly. Now we're getting this stall out a bit, and I don't feel weird investing in this project still to this day. So I would totally accumulate this at this time. I don't feel like it's too expensive, and I still feel like there's a lot more ROI in that particular project than what we're seeing with XRP. Just my 2 cents. I've already accumulated all my XRP a long time ago, so that's what, just consider the context, of course. Then we have HBAR. This is another project that I pretty much invest the same amount in as XLM, so I would consider these worth similar percentages of a portfolio. You could consider them like 10 to 15% each. If you wanted to look at it more on the higher end, if you're somebody who has already like 25% of your portfolio in XRP, that would balance it out really nicely between those 3 projects. If you're somebody who doesn't plan on holding any ETH or any Solana or any Binance token, etc., then you could consider higher percentages. Again, do what's best for you. But I feel almost the same exact way about HBAR as I do with XLM. And also, this doesn't have prior cycles to consider. So once this breaks out into price discovery, it'll be pretty fascinating to see how it goes, because it'll just be like something we haven't really seen. And also in the last cycle, it was kind of a weird bull run for HBAR. I'm not alone in that. But again, there was a lot of other distractions, meme coins, NFTs, a lot of stuff that was just stealing attention back then. And this cycle, I am much more bullish on the projects that actually have, and I hate to use the word, but some utility and an actual working product behind them, actual vision, not just a fucking meme. All right, let's move over to Aerodrome. This is a project that I've also invested in quite recently. I forgot what level I got it at, but it's doing pretty damn good in the midst of everything. A couple things to mention about Aerodrome is the chart structurally, although it's a fresh chart, I really liked this parallel channel that was going on for like an exhausting amount of time. So you can see over here, this was a 120-day parallel channel where it was in this really tight band, selling off until it got below this 236 fib, which we would later find out to be more like a spring. So in Wyckoff method, if we go back to this chart here, you have your buying climax, then you have a little bit of like a fake out double top sort of vibe. Up here, it was the UT in phase B. In many instances, it could be a higher high, but it's a upside bull trap. That was the case in this schematic and also in the real Bitcoin chart. And then you see this style right here, this creek, followed by a pivot at the spring. Well, that's what Arrow did. As this creek, pivot at the spring, and then the jump across the creek is what it's completed. And I forgot when I got in. Was it 70 something cents? Who cares? It's doing really well. And I think this thing is going to go up to the 1618 more than likely. So from where we are right now to that level is another 500% to the upside. I do think this thing will clear $5. And once it gets above about 370, I think it will very rapidly move to about 8. And that would be like my upper end. I don't know if it could cross 10. That's a little drastic. And for where this project is in the conversation with Coinbase and Coin being public, and just my overall feelings on Coinbase in general and where things are headed with USDC and Circle and just the New World Order's plans for our future economy and the Aquarian economy, I think Aerodrome was the right bet as a venture capital play. I would also feel a lot more confident investing in this at this time than some other projects. So just my opinion, but I'm sharing with you guys vulnerably how I feel. I'm glad that I picked it up when I did. Of course, I could have gotten in earlier, but I just didn't even really know too much about the project earlier. Now I know a little bit more. And yeah, I'm not here to say that like it's the next Caspa or anything like outlandish like that, but I do think it's going to continue higher into price discovery probably as soon as October. So let's move on to Jasmy. This is another project that I've had like a weird relationship with where I've bought a bunch of it, then I sold a bunch of it, then I bought a bunch of it again. And yeah, now it's just like it's kind of like this standard venture capital play in my portfolio. I am throwing a Hail Mary with this one because this chart looks like absolute shit, okay? It's similar to like the Onyx coin chart, like it's an absolute shit coin chart, but it had a crazy move to the upside and you can't disregard that. So as a neutral investor, you just have to see things for what they are. And I do feel if we can just clear some of this liquidity grab up to around 30 cents, that's a 1,600% move. Like that is insane, okay? So I'm willing to take the gamble on a venture capital position. When we speak venture capital, we're talking stuff that's typically less than 5% of the overall portfolio. So just consider this is not something I would put as much as like Ethereum, for instance, or Bitcoin or XRP or Binance token or Solana. I would not be willing to bet as much on Jasmy as I would consider on those projects in the midst of like a bear market, for example. Also, I would not actively currently invest in Ethereum or XRP or Binance. Why? Because they're already quite high, in my opinion, as opposed to Jasmy, which has a lot of upside potential, right? So that's just an opinion. I like to see XRP, for example, go up 200 and just so you can see where I'm coming from. And it's not to like shit on one thing to make another thing sound better. That's not my point. I'm even using an example of my biggest investment. But to see XRP at this moment go up 241%, it would have to clear $10. Okay? Do I feel like that's happening? Yes, I do feel like that will happen. But that would just be Jasmy going back to the December peak. Whilst if it was to clear up to the 786 around, let's call it 12 cents, we're talking 589%. That's hilarious. So for us to go 589% in XRP, we would need $21. So we're really banking on the upper end of things. And considering market cap and where everything would be at in the overall conversation, that's pretty fucking overheated. Whilst with Jasmy, I mean, you're barely recovered this full move back when everything was topping in the last cycle. So I think it's fair to entertain the fact that it's not like if I only had $500 right now, I would rather put some of it in Jasmy and some of it in maybe some more speculative venture capital plays that have a lot of upside potential rather than just putting it all in on XRP while XRP is already near all-time highs, or in Binance token while it's already at all-time highs, or Bitcoin, right? Just considering the ROI play. If we were at the bottom of the bear market, I would maybe say something different, but we're pretty late in the cycle right now. So yeah, my thoughts on Jasmy is that it's a bit of a Hail Mary, but I feel comfortable in about a 4 or 5% allocation in the portfolio to wait this one out till we get much higher, much more dramatic prices to the upside. Now we're looking at Doge, which has also become one of my biggest investments. Looking pretty good today, about 24 cents. If I turn off all this noise, you can see that we've been struggling a lot with this like quarter territory, this 25 cent. And that was the level that we broke down from back in February 2025 before eclipse season. So now we're back at the next eclipse season and we've recovered all of that back to the same place we started. So Yes, it hasn't been the most exhilarating ride so far for Doge, but I think that's the case for many other altcoins. And this is one of the few altcoins that when you zoom out, you can't deny its ability to do crazy things during an alt season. Because over here, we can see that it's had a pretty nasty correction after breaking all-time highs. This was an 80% correction, but then it went on to do an additional 2,500%. I feel like this correction we had here is the same correction we had here. It's very similar in my opinion. The pain also that anyone who's invested in this felt. And this is not a stranger to straight line breakouts because you can even see in this current cycle, we've had this move right here, almost 200%, this move right here, 400 and something percent. Obviously, XRP is like a better hold in this comparison from bear market to where it's currently trading at, but this outperformed XRP in the last cycle. And I'm not sure overall if it's totally outperformed XRP. This is 218,000%, but it might have. This might have overall. Not that that even matters, because the only way this matters is if you're a fucking time traveler or if you're somebody who is part of these cycles. Oh my God, yeah. So this, if you bought at like the same levels, like to where we are today, this is 77,000%, while Doge is 218,000 when marking off the same level. It's fucking unbelievable. So yeah, this is always broken out into price discovery. It's always had really good returns during alt season. And in my opinion, the fact that we're trading around where we are and we're not in this upper end, just to get back to prior all-time highs is 200%. To me, that feels safe. So I would rather invest in Doge right now than invest in XRP based on ROI. And maybe even, I wouldn't say more than XLM or HBAR unless I already had a exposure to XRP, XLM, and HBAR. That would be the only time I would say it's probably better to go with Doge right now, just based on past performance, ROI, potential based on where we're at, and the fact that, you would need about a you would need about a $10 XRP to get to just retesting the same price of Doge's last cycle high. So I'm feeling pretty good about the Doge play, in my opinion. And also, I'm entertaining prices in the $2, potentially even $4, based on what it did in every past cycle. But we'll return back to that in a future podcast when we're doing our exit strategy stuff. Now we have Avalanche. Where are we at, AVAX? All right, Avalanche also, let me assume 200. Ooh, okay, very nice. So we have 460% to the upside. So this isn't dominating by any stretch of the imagination, but with late stage investments in the overall cycle, this is not something I would sleep on because I do feel like this will at least hit $100 again. So even if this has a very shitty alt season and it doesn't do so well, what we saw underperformers do in the last cycle was they at least made it close to the 888 fib. So for me, that would be sitting right there at that psychological level of 100, and that's a 300% move to the upside. That is not a small amount of money. Okay, so I know it's not melt your face off 10x's, but we need to consider that in order to get 10x's, you have to usually buy shit that's very new, or you have to buy stuff that's already had major corrections, or you have to buy bottoms, like very, very good at getting into something that's oversold, right? We're not seeing any of that right now. Most things have done pretty good off their recovery from the April 7th tariff crash. Yeah, like just consider that. Unless you buy absolute bottoms or something has recently crashed because of whatever nonsense that has gone down. I mean, you can see here, if you were to have bought the absolute bottom of that tariff correction up to the 888 fib, that sits at about 550%. It's a pretty nice move. I mean, you're rarely going to accomplish that in the stock market unless you're talking many years of waiting as an investor. So I'm feeling pretty good about Avalanche for this upcoming alt season, and I do entertain price discovery. I think that's definitely in the cards. Can it hit this 1618? Probably not, but will it at least get into this territory? Probably around 250. I could see that, and that would be like what Cardano did in the last cycle, where it made a slightly new all-time high, and then it keeled over from there. Not weird to go slightly into price discovery and then just lose gas. Again, because the push into price discovery is nothing special for alts when all the alts are doing it at the same time. It's only special when a project is moving in isolation, which we've seen before. We've seen this with many random projects. I mean, we saw what happened with Pepe. I mean, Sheeb in the last cycle, it did sort of just move on its own. What Caspa did, of course, probably a bunch of other examples. But needless to say, unless it's moving in its own isolation, it's just moving up with everything else. And therefore, if we're seeing a lot of liquidity flowing into the alt market, then we would just be looking at any chart at that time and probably judging based on where the RSI is at on the weekly or the 2 week or even the monthly, if it's time to get out or not. And we'll talk about that more in future podcasts. Let's move on to Aave. Do I even have? Yes, I do. All right, Ave's been one of the best performers from this tariff crash because it was one of the steepest and sharpest corrections we've had during the tariff crash. So it lost 70%, but then the recovery has been pretty wild, almost 170% to the upside. And this is a project that did very well in the last bull run. So I've always talked about it, buying the bottom on Aave. It was called like Lend or something back here. But like, look at that, man, 140 fucking thousand%. So this is like, I just showed you that if you bought the very bottom support, like around here on XRP, today you would be up 70,000 to 80,000%. In this one cycle alone, in 2 years, this thing went up 140,000%. Mamma mia, double the amount. So this is why, like, I think it's important when you guys hear me say certain things about XRP, like I've said throughout today's podcast, where I'm saying like I wouldn't buy it, but maybe I would get XLM, or like if I had XLM, XRP, and HBAR, I would maybe go with Doge instead, etc. Don't get butthurt when I say these things if you're like one of those XRP maxi people. First of all, like, we're not an XRP maxi community. We're not any isolated coin community. That's not my vibe. That's a cult. Okay. We're here as sophisticated investors balancing out our portfolios based on our own investment thesis and our own awareness and our own understanding. I don't know everything about all the altcoins. I admit that. I actually want to avoid knowing too much about them because, in my opinion, that's a lot of static and I want to focus on signal. But anyways, getting back to this, a lot of people could have missed out on this insane move for Aave or many other projects in the last market cycle because they were so addicted and cult-like with something like XRP. We want to avoid that type of behavior, guys. That is not healthy. That is dangerous, okay? So please, one of the things I admit I could work on is not being so quick to call a chart worthless of an investment opportunity, because it's happened to me with Onyx Coin where I mean, nobody can say I'm wrong. It's an absolute shitcoin chart. It's a gross looking chart, but we saw it go up 1,500% or whatever. Again, when something looks so shitty in crypto, you could wake up a week later and it could be up 1,000%. It's crazy. That's the world we live in. So just be aware, all right, that if you get too distracted on one thing and they're also too quick to write something off, you can miss out on a lot of opportunities. And I've learned so much by doing these red pills and getting to look at 4 to 6 different altcoins every single week. Like, we're 200 something podcasts deep. I've learned so much. I can admit that. And some of my worst calls in general are always opportunities for me to refine and get better at my craft. It's never a moment to give up and to say, oh, and blame somebody. Or no, you look at yourself in the mirror, you admit where you were off, you take note, you keep going. Okay. And I'm just pointing this out with Aave here because what I saw happen in the last cycle, I don't want it to happen to everyone again in this cycle. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with diversifying, I guess is the long-winded thing. But I do believe by me just talking about this, it's added some value for some of you here in our community, and that's really all that matters. So, not a whole lot to say about Avalanche, besides the fact that double top is probably coming very, very soon, a lot sooner than some might think. And I do think there's a possibility for price discovery, but I have a hard time entertaining above $1,000. That's a lot, you know. So if we were to look at from where we are right now to that psychological level of 1,000, I think anything above a thousand is like it's gonna be quickly sold off. So sure, in this market we could have miracles happen. We've seen this thing do crazy shit before. But you see right here, this was a very deceiving correction after a new all-time high. This is what Cardano did in the last cycle, but it did not push higher. It actually just went to a slight new all-time high, and then that was it. It was a blow off top. But this was a beautiful back test of the fib that I tell you guys to add to your fib tool, the 888 fib. Back test perfectly of the 888, one more move higher, but then look at this. Everyone that was waiting for the 1618 got fucked up because you can't wait for this perfect target, guys. That's not how it works. Fibonacci himself would say you're stupid. That's my best joke of today. But yeah, seriously, that you don't do that. So you always go below. You always, if your target says sell at 1,000, I want you to look at 800. Okay, I know it sounds crazy, but like you could miss the whole fucking play by waiting and waiting and getting greedy to the upside. So even if you just bought that back test right there and you got in like 50% of the move, you were 1,500%. You could have missed out on 1,500% because you got greedy waiting for fucking $1,000 Ave. Like a dunce. Okay? That's insane, man. To see that much ROI in a move where you were already kind of buying the top. All right? Just be careful, guys. I think this was a good lesson of a couple things that I just mentioned just by bringing up this Ave chart. So that was really, really good. Let's quickly look at XDC. This is a project that it's looked crazy this year in the chart, like one of the weirdest looking charts. But when we look at it back in last year, it was doing the same shit. Absolutely chaos chart. And you see this move right here. I think we are repeating a very similar move. So you see right here, big black. Let me turn off all the. But like you can tell we're trading around the golden pocket. Here we were trading around the golden pocket. Now I'm going to turn this all off. And I just want to show you how we have this sharp move to the upside, a little bit of a pullback, followed by this Christmas tree top, and then a lot of chop. And then finally, once we break out, that's the true price discovery moment. So we have this rally here, a little bit of a correction. That's right here. Then we have this Christmas tree top. That's there, the Christmas tree top. And then we have a lot of this chop. That's what we're in the midst of right now. And I think we're somewhere around all of this. So in my opinion, I think we're probably going to double top into this, maybe into the first week of September, or we might not even have enough gas to do that. But what the correction will be like is like this, just like a lot of chop and then a release into October, November, ultimately maybe even December. So if we were to look at the timing of where we're at around this move, let's say it's like right here. It's about 150 days. Yeah, that gets us to the middle of December. So that is not weird to assume that we're in this kind of chop right here. And then this all gets moving really quick. Anybody who knows about alt season knows that it's pretty rapid, pretty violent stuff. So XDC is actually mimicking kind of this chaos that we saw in the last cycle. It's not so weird. Not so weird at all. It is kind of fascinating how we went lower than the tariff correction, though. This June 22nd timeframe, back when the U.S. bombed these Iran bases. So yeah, fascinating how some charts move the same over time, and they're playing out similar patterns because it's all just moving on algorithms anyways. Yeah, speaking of algos, let's look at Algorand. All right, Algorand, very lackluster overall performance. I don't know how much of this I hold in my portfolio, maybe under 2% in general. It's a typical venture capital play percentage. But where we are right here, you see the C19 crash. This was the tariff crash. We're trading pretty much at same levels. And then when this released, we still had a major back test. So you see where it tops in August and then it has this major correction into November, followed by a massive move up. So just from that similar level of the low right here, I think we're actually repeating this. So you see that low? I think that's more like here. And we're going to move up a little bit, maybe around the September eclipse season. We have this little move down, but then ultimately 165 days later, this should pretty much be back at the same price. So if we were to call that low here, then 165 days later would bring us into like the second week of January. That's not strange at all. So that also aligns with the kind of timing of it all. By the way, these are 3-day candles, so just keep that in mind. All right, so yeah, Algorand, it's not my top pick. It's one of those that, yes, it's a pretty undervalued at this time, so it's not like you're buying a top, but it's also not, in my opinion, worth putting as much energy into as maybe something like XLM or XDC even, or HBAR. I'd put more emphasis on those, maybe even more on Doge, to be honest, as well. Let's look at Solana. This is a coin I also don't give too much of a shit about at this current time. This was one where if you bought the bear market, congratulations, like you're up 1,000%. But you can see since March 2024, we're going on 500 days of sideways. So it's already exhausted. And what's interesting about where it's exhausted at is the same area as the prior all-time high. And then remember, when we made this slightly new all-time high, it was when Trump's inauguration was also coupled with the launch of his meme coin, which was on the Solana blockchain. And it was during like the Hawk Tua weird, meme time. And then we saw a major wipeout too of almost 70%. And now we're still back at the same horizontal trading range. So being in Solana was really fun if you were somebody who accumulated the bear market. But as of lately, 500 days, let's call it almost 2 years now of just pretty much trading at around $200, which is the resistance of the last bull run. So that's not me saying bad things about Solana. It's just at this time, it's at a fair, quote unquote, fair price. It's not doing something where it's crazy overvalued because we're not breaking into price discovery like what we're seeing with Bitcoin, for example. Like Bitcoin, I think is expensive right now. Some people might disagree with me, but I think like 130 to 150K Bitcoin is already very expensive. Then when we talk about 170 to 180, that's like really fucking expensive. So even though I hold Bitcoin and I cover it pretty much in every single podcast, it's more like to just understand the energy of the market because that's what Bitcoin is. But I still think it's expensive. Solana, I think, has come to a place where it kind of understands its fair value is about $150. 200 is where it starts to get a little bit of, I'm not ready yet. And obviously, we have yet to prove past 300 concretely. So I think once it passes 300, obviously you're heading into expensive territory because nobody's agreed to that price yet, clearly. And alt season, we will have that, but it will like be like a blow off top kind of vibe. Or maybe something like this where we have an expansion phase, a slightly new all-time high, and then we'll have another major correction for Solana. Who knows how much it could be? I remember in the last cycle, I was telling people it would be over 95%, 90 to 95%, and it ended up having a 97% correction. So I don't know if it'll go as much next time. Maybe next time it'll be like an 80% correction, kind of like what Bitcoin did over time, where Bitcoin 2 cycles ago, it corrected around 83%. And then in the last cycle, it corrected 70 something percent. That's what Solana is probably going to do. So if it can move up to 1,000, which that's a big move. Like if we could go to 1,000 Solana, like that means I think ETH needs to be around 14,000 14 or 15,000, which is absolutely in the cards. But yeah, we need to have a full repeat of all past alt cycles. We need this one to go the same way. But yeah, if we were to have a 70 or an 80% correction for Solana after hitting 1,000, then we're talking of coming back to this major trading range, which is what I was saying about XRP, guys. What I was saying earlier about XRP is we don't want it to just move in a straight line because we want it to come back to support levels. Now, the good thing about XRP is it's been trading so long above $2 that what we would hope for is once it clears 8 and starts heading past 10, that when it comes back down, that it will hold this $2 range. That would be what we would want. We don't want it to crash all the way back to 50 cents again. And I'm seeing people ask me to this day, hey, Waters, I heard this one analyst said that it's going to go to 50 cents. And it's like, guys, I heard that same shit back when it was 50 cents and then it broke out to $3, right? I forgot the guy that was talking about it. I don't know if he became popular or anything, but his whole thesis at the time was that we were going to crash down to like 40 cents or something. I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. If that's what people want to believe, that's what they can believe. But the point that I'm covering right now with the focus on Solana is that if we break out to something like 800 to 1,000, that I think it has a very strong base to return back to 130 to 140. And that's very good because that's what you want. You want structural horizontal trading ranges so that it's not just going all the way back to the bear market of the prior cycle. Again, I'm trying to fill you guys with as much educational information as possible. If there's no direct analysis to talk about, because there's a lot of just repeats. Whoa, Chainlink is looking very good right now. Oh shit, I was not anticipating. Okay, so it's because of Ethereum. Yeah, that makes sense. Similar to the last cycle. So look at where... My God, last cycle, Link was a monster. Like, look at this. Like, that's like a little over a year. 1,000%, and like everything was fucked at this time because of the C19 crash. Link looked amazing. Like, wow, dude. If you bought Link in 2019, congrats. Shit was 40 cents. Yeah, amazing. Okay, so I'm not going to do too much analysis on this, but we're coming back to the macro 702 fib. I like to see that. I think pretty much with ETH breaking into price discovery, we should see a quick move to $40 on Link. And then likely during an alt season, we'll see an overall move. But keep in mind that Link will still chop a lot. Like, we can see that over here, we went straight to the 1618 and then we came all the way back down to retest the prior all-time highs. I don't know if we can make it all the way up to those levels in this cycle, but because that would be like doing something like this. There was your C19 crash vibe. So that would be like this whole section over here. I don't think we'll redo that. Market cap would be quite dramatic at that time. But again, you know, we're talking about a $15,000 ETH or a $14,000 ETH. We can potentially see a $150 Link for sure. It's not too crazy. From above price discovery, that's less than 200%. I would say that's very normal. Nothing out of the ordinary. Here we had about 255% move. And on this breakout here, we initially had a 300% move. So this breakout here, we had a almost 200% move. So yeah, that like around 200% once it breaks into price discovery after a little bit of a shakeout. Very normal stuff. And again, remember, we have yet to backtest the May 2021 high. And this project did not go into a higher high in November 2021 like a lot of other projects did. So we've been below all-time high now for quite a while. And this is yet to catch up to ETH. So what I was saying before about how ETH has now caught up, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of these top projects such as Chainlink, Cardano, even potentially even VeChain. They're going to start catching up to ETH, what ETH just did. So this is a good sign for Link. I'm surprised actually that it's caught up so much. Fucking 15% today. I mean, I didn't even realize. It's interesting. Random, right? Okay, we're looking at Cardano. Cardano, yep. So kind of following the same sort of concept that I think once we clear this December high, we will quickly go to the 888 fib. Once we get over there, we have just a couple of, ranges to cut through before bringing into price discovery. And this is what I was sharing about the Cardano chart and the all-time high that we had in Cardano. You can see barely went into price discovery, had a little bit of a back test, and then not too much higher. So we measure where we went past the 2018 top was 80% initially, and then the full move was about 130%. So if you were somebody that was looking at this like Bitcoin and that it was just going to break out and go so much higher than prior all-time highs, well, that was a disappointment. But also, if you were somebody who was only like looking at XRP and you were not considering Cardano and you didn't buy this recovery from the C19 crash, well, you missed out on a 2,500% move. Like, you would have needed to buy the absolute bottom low of the Ripple SEC case crash and sell the exact top on April 14th of 2021 in order to make 1,000% move on XRP. Meanwhile, Cardano, you didn't even need to buy that low. You could have just bought the backup phase over here, which lasted almost 3 months, and then you could have made a 2,500% move, at least a 2,000% move, and the 2,000 to 3,000% move twice. You had two chances. So again, it's not to compare one against the other. It's just to say there's nothing wrong with diversifying the portfolio a little bit, balancing things out, and there's many other opportunities, even when you're late in the cycle. So, yep, I don't think this will go into price discovery and hit the 1618. It didn't in the last cycle, and the last cycle should have been the easiest cycle for it to do such a thing because we had the Fed pretty much infinitely printing money into oblivion, giving out stimulus checks, which, by the way, I saw something floating around that there's potential stimulus checks coming soon, but I don't know if that's confirmed. Is that bullshit? Can you guys let me know? It'd be fascinating if they actually do move forward with stimulus checks for September, October, like that back to school time. Let me know if there's anything like 100% confirmed about that. Be interested. But yes, I do think that there is a possibility during alt season that we could get a $4 Cardano. Let me move on to VeChain. Very underperforming in general. So this one is pretty lackluster. And for me, one of my biggest venture capital bets is actually VTHO. And I'll just quickly run by why. And it's because if we were to make it back to this range of the 888 into the prior all-time high or the high back in 2018, which was very short-lived, you're looking at about 1,000% move. So during alt season, this can come up to about 2 to 3 cents max. I mean, let's just call it around 2 cents. And from where we're trading at now and where I've accumulated most, I would be getting a 1,000% move in the event of that. I am not going to be waiting for this to break out into price discovery because I'm not seeing that in the cards. Okay. But VeChain is definitely underperforming. We are not seeing it as a part of the conversation in this cycle. Also in the last cycle, it wasn't spoken about too much. There were some influencers that covered it a lot. I mean, I think even like BitBoy Crypto covered it a lot, and he was really popular back then. I don't know what he's doing now. Maybe, smoking meth out of a Doritos bag or something classy. But yeah, like with this cycle here, we're not getting any coverage on VeChain. Nobody really cares about it. I don't really hear it brought up ever. So probably not something worth putting any energy into. Just disregard it for right now. It's an old investment for me, so I'm just planning on getting rid of it in this cycle. Wherever it goes, if it gets a little overheated, I would assume somewhere around this 15 to 20 cent level, I will get rid of it. I don't have any desire to hold on to this project long term anymore, just because of the kind of environment that we're moving into generally. So quickly covered VeChain and the thesis on VeTHO. Let's quickly look at Theta, and also Theta underperforming. So this is like probably one of my more like, let's just call it bad investments in general, where I put a lot of emphasis into building a theta position and it has not done what I thought it would do. There's probably something deeper into it, and I just haven't cared to put too much energy into the research or the decoding because I've went so heavy on XRP, XLM, HBAR, Doge, and like a lot of other things this cycle that it's not like I'm hurting with my theta investment, like to be 100% honest, but I could also be 100% honest and say that it has been a bad investment overall considering where everything else is at. You know, I could have just put the money in stuff that is a little bit more relevant and at least part of the conversation. Like the one thing that XRP has going for it is it's a part of the conversation quite often because of all those developments with the SEC case. So there's that. And then obviously many other things. But yeah, theta not really doing so well. I will be considering getting rid of my theta probably around this 786 territory, or maybe what I taught you guys earlier. If my target on the technical side is the 888 fib at $11, I would get rid of it like 950. So I would be getting out below the psychological level of 10 and maybe even just call it really safe and get out at 9. And we have passed liquidity around 9, like a lot of times we've traded into $9, so that's not weird. And yeah, I mean, for anything that is accumulated right now to get out at $9 is a really nice move. We're talking a 900% move. So nothing, that's not a loss, obviously, especially when the stock market is like 15% max per year. But yeah, this is something where really it's arduous. It's a waiting game. Hasn't really performed at all. I could admit that. And I'm really glad I haven't added to my theta or T-Fuel bag in quite a while. I don't even remember the last time that I've invested in these projects. Same story for T-Fuel. And seeing T-Fuel get out at around this red line, which I've marked off at, 37 cents, which was a bunch of rejections up here. That's in alignment with like the $9 theta. Same thesis. I would just get rid of it all, sell it all. Who cares? And park it in stables. Let's move on to sand. We have a couple more projects to look at. We have sand. We're going to run through these pretty quickly. Oh, actually quite a similar chart to what we were just looking at with theta. I didn't actually mean to put these ones at the end. This was just the way that they all ranked. But this again is like a venture capital play where not really part of the conversation like it was in the last cycle. So this is something that I would hold off on adding to. I would not be putting any energy into this. If you guys are watching this today, don't look at this project as something to put money into. I'm just being 100,000,000% honest with you. But a move up to around the 702 fib, which you can see was right before the bear market initiated, that's an 800% move. So I feel pretty good if this doesn't move up to an all-time high, or at least back testing the prior cycle high, which is unlikely. At least coming up to this technical 702 level at $2.80 gives me a really big profit, 850%. Not feeling bad about that at all. Let's move on to Gala. I mean, pretty much copy paste the same analysis. Chart is looking very similar. Also in gaming, also not really as much of the conversation today as it once was in the last cycle. In the last cycle, it was launched at the right place at the right time, given everything that was going on in crypto. Although, if we were to have a move up to the 702, this is an even bigger ROI play. So we're talking about 24 cents to get back to this 23 cent level. So that right there shows that there's a lot of upside potential given it gets, the boost from the overall alt season. Can't share too many unique thoughts on it though, besides what I've already shared on these past couple charts. And Filecoin almost the same. Filecoin is back at the base. So let's call where it's at right now a fair price. It has been gravitating back to this $2.50 level quite a bit. It likes this level. It doesn't really want to pass this $10 level, as that's been the case since the bear market which initiated back at the Q4 time of 2021 into the start of 2022. And you can see it fell through all the liquidity that it shot through in a Christmas tree, like blow off top style fashion. And where we're at right now is around a fair price. And I could say that confidently just because of the fact that we haven't really wanted to get past this $8.40 to $10 level. So what that means in plain English is if we could surpass this 382 somewhere around $12.83, call it 13, it should sharply move up to the bottom of the golden pocket. And from where we are now to that level is 1,400%. I don't know if I can entertain past a $40 Filecoin for this cycle. That's already very expensive. And just given the way it behaves around this level of 30 to 40, it hasn't spent too much time past there. It was short-lived back here. So that gives you something to kind of consider for the alt season on this Filecoin investment. And then lastly, we have AMP. AMP in a very similar situation where it's what I would call a fair price. And from where we're at right now to around the 702 fib, or what would be really probably the area of most interest is around 4 to 5 cents, which is where we were struggling to hold as a support before this broke down into a pretty devastating bear market, 97% losses. So again, venture capital, you'd want to get out before the more upper end targets. I do not think that this is going to go into price discovery. And just to be honest, I mean, I would probably try to get out at around 4 cents max. So based on where we're at today to 4 cents, pretty damn good play, 1,000% move to the upside. So we're almost at 2 hours here. I need to wrap this one up. We are seeing Bitcoin dominance break pretty low into this weekly close here today, moving a little faster than I would like to see, but also we have Bitcoin CME chart closing off at 117,235. We did have the gap here fill this week, and now it's going to open around here. So I effectively assume there will be a little bit of an upside gap, not too much, probably get filled. And then I do think overall this upcoming week, the 34th week of the year, should be bullish up until about the weekend. And then I wouldn't be shocked if we get a little bit of turbulence around the weekend, maybe Friday, Saturday, Sunday into next week's red pill. And then it's all about how are we going to move up into this first week of September, the 36th week, mimicking what we did in 2013, 2017, and 2021. So I will recap that all as we get closer. Next week's podcast will be mostly focused on just that pivot between new moon and the upcoming total lunar eclipse. So definitely stay tuned for that. And I hope you all enjoyed today's spontaneous What I'm Investing In special Red Pill podcast 229. Looking forward to 230 next week. And I'm wishing you all an amazing rest of your weekend in the Matrix. Much love.